initial exposure to Christian theology, which spanned more than half my Christian life, was under the guidance of Calvinist teachings. Upon expanding my study to encompass other doctrinal interpretations, I concluded that many points of theological variance are ultimately not essential grounds for division. I did find one teaching in particular, the doctrine of predestination as presented by our Baptist Church, to be fundamentally incompatible with my personal exegesis of the scriptures. Nevertheless, let's choose not to argue viewpoints. Let's explore the two sides. The concept of predestination is primarily drawn from passages in the New Testament, particularly the writings of the Apostle Paul. Romans 8:29-30, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called, and those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. Ephesians 1:5, he predestined us for adoption as sons through Jesus Christ, according to the purpose of his will. Ephesians 1:11, in him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. Romans 9:11, 15:16, speaking about Jacob and Esau, though they were not yet born and had done nothing either good or bad, in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of works, but because of him who calls. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God, who shows mercy. Acts 13:48. And when the Gentiles heard this, they were glad and glorified the word of the Lord. And as many as were appointed to eternal life believed. There are two major Protestant interpretations of predestination, Calvinism and Arminianism. Calvinist interpretation emphasizes the absolute sovereignty of God in salvation. God's predestination is unconditional and prior to any foreseen human action, faith, or works. God from eternity chose a specific fixed number of individuals, the elect, for salvation and eternal life. This is often called unconditional election. On foreknowledge, the word foreknew, in Romans 8:29 is interpreted as foreloved or chose beforehand, not merely knowing a future event. God's foreknowledge is of the people themselves, whom he chose to save. Human will is bound by sin-total depravity. So people are incapable of initiating saving faith. God's calling effectual grace is irresistible for the elect. Arminian interpretation emphasizes God's foreknowledge and the importance of human free will and response. God's predestination is conditional on God's foreknowledge of who would freely choose to have faith in Jesus Christ. God looked ahead and chose those he knew would believe. The word foreknew in Romans 8:29 is interpreted as simply having advanced knowledge of a future human choice, specifically who would exercise saving faith. God predestines the believers, not the individual apart from their choice. Humanity possesses the free will to either accept or reject God's offer of salvation. God's grace is resistible, and salvation is contingent upon the human response of faith. Let's focus on Jesus and his saving grace. Whichever interpretation you believe, don't argue with other believers. Rejoice that you are chosen and go out and preach the gospel, whether God elected or foreknew them. People still need to hear about the salvation and eternal life offered only through Jesus Christ.